Welcome to episode 30 of Rabbit Hole Reviews. What we're looking at today is a Finnish M39 pattern Mosin Nagant rifle chambered in the ever popular 7.62 by 54 Wind. So the rifle we're looking at right now is one I picked up about 2 years ago during COVID. I never got around to shooting it until today. I've got several of these, and I wanted to see, well, one, if this thing was good to go and not going to blow up in my face, and two, I wanted to see where the sights were at. So both were pleasant surprises, as you can see. So enjoy this roughly 3.5 minutes of B-roll footage, after which we'll get into a little bit of a deep dive in the M39 Mosin pattern bolt-action rifle. So here we are, back again, continuing the review of the Finnish pattern Mosin, the M39. Of course, this is episode 30. So I just realized this is actually the first mil-serp rifle that I've reviewed on the channel. I've done a lot of mil-serp pistols, but this is the first rifle, and there's going to be more down the line. But today is the Mosin, more specifically the Finnish pattern M39. I could probably make a video talking an hour about just the Finnish pattern Mosins in the past, the 27, the 28, 39. But we're going to just focus on a few key features of this pattern, the M39, and why I think you should buy a rifle like this in 2023. So the Finnish 39, Model 39, is pretty much the last of the line of the Finnish Mosins. They had other ones before that, which we won't get into. I will say that the M39 was designed in 1939, as the name would suggest, but did not see service in time for the Russian Winter War, Russian-Finnish Winter War of 1939. At that point, I think they'd only made about 10 of them, so they were not in service. When the Finns concluded that war, sued for peace, whatever, they quickly kicked the M39 into production as the standard weapon. And they made roughly 96 to 98,000 of these Don't quote me on that, or someone correct me in the comments, feel free. This is a big rifle. Now, Mosins are not particularly small, but they had other versions of Mosins like M38s and M44s that had carbine length barrels and were overall shorter. This is a long rifle. Mine measured out at 46.5 inches roughly, so almost 4 feet long. And I put it on the scale off screen and it came in at 9.8-ish pounds. So I'll basically rounded up to 10 pounds because that was the empty weight. So it's not particularly light and it's not small. But what do you get in exchange for that overall bulkiness and weight? Well, you get a really smooth shooting Mosin, which I guess that sounds like that doesn't make sense, right? That's kind of, oxymoron. I don't know. It's crazy that Mosins can shoot well. And this one actually does. This specific example does. And that has to do with the heavier profile barrel that you're going to find on an M39 that's heavier than, say, a 9130. Now, I have no issues with 9130s, but they don't shoot anywhere near as smooth as this rifle. And that owes to the weight, which is a result of the heavier barrel and also the heavier, longer stock. So if you look at this stock, it's a two-piece stock. They have a joint right in here. They've got it finger groove joints right in here. It's a two-piece stock. It has a full pistol grip or semi-pistol grip. It's kind of enlarged. And this thing is so big, I can't even fit the whole thing on the screen. But let me move it out of the way a little bit of itself so I can show you the full length of the stock. It goes all the way to the end, and we'll kind of get it out of the screen there. Really well-made stock. Look at that grain on that wood. Just such a nice rifle. Hexagonal receiver in this one. And pretty much, from what I can tell, all the 39s are hexagonal receivers. Don't quote me on that. If you notice, the sights on this rifle, they start out at 150 meters. So that's an interesting point. So these generally shoot a little high. You just have to account for that. And I just aim for the belt buckle. That's not a very scientific shooting method. But I shoot at the belt buckle and I hit the target. And that's, by hitting the target, I mean somewhere on the target at distance. Not very scientific. And if you look here, they also have an improvement over the 9130. You can adjust the windage on the front with this big flathead screw that you see right in the frame. Hopefully it's in frame. So any multi-tool or any crude screwdriver or even a knife blade in worst case scenario will fit in there, and you can adjust for windage out in the field. So I find that as a nice feature. I've definitely used it in the past. I found that most of these rifles are pretty spot on windage-wise. You just have to account for the sights. And their Mosin sights, are they better than 9130s? I don't know. This typical tangent sights of the period. This is 19th century sight technology that was kind of carried over. You got to wonder why countries kept using tangent sights, even like the 98K. By the time the 98K was adopted, there were better options out there. I don't know why they kept with that. Even the Kalashnikov. Of course, we could go into a sidebar conversation about the Kalashnikov's rear sight. I get it. It's for fast target acquisition, blah, blah, blah. But if they put a little more care into the rear sight, even if they hadn't mounted it on the dust cover, even if they kept it on the trunnion area and they just made it a little bit more precise, they could have still made an aperture sight and would have been more effective, in my opinion. But anyway, moving on. So you're going to get a heavier barrel, really nice construction. The quality on these is definitely superior than to the 9130s that I've run into. I view it on par with like one of the Polish M44 carbines, and I wish the Poles had made a pattern like this and not made that M44. As much as I love the Polish M44, it's not a fun rifle to shoot, and this one actually is. I can drill targets all day long at 300 yards with this. So much so that I'm actually surprised when I hit it, because I'm always thinking, well, I'm shooting a Mosin, so it can't be that great. But with proper ammunition, even with not that great ammunition, I'm still ringing steel at 300 yards. So a couple downsides. I mean, one, 7.62x54 is a rimmed cartridge, so you're going to have to deal with all the quirks of that. And really, the only by means of quirks, it's really just the fact that you're going to deal with potential rim lock if you don't load it correctly. And then if you look here, these are the stripper clips that come with Mosins, that are used with Mosins. I'm not too fond of these. I don't know if it's just this particular brand of stripper clip that I'm using, but they're definitely not as good as, say, something like a Mauser stripper clip that you can see here in frame. They're just so much smaller and so much better. And that's just basically because the head of the cartridge, the base of the cartridge is not rimmed, and you don't have to deal with a lot of that stuff. But, I deal with it with the 303 British, another one of my favorite milsurps, which I'm going to be reviewing down the line. I definitely prefer the number 4 Enfields, or really any Enfield, especially the number 4 series, over a Mosin. But I think you would buy something like a Mosin, not just this one, although I recommend this one if you're going to buy one, because I think it's the top of the line final evolution of what the Mosin can be. But you really buy Mosin-Nagants because of the cartridge. And the cartridge, 7.62x54 rimmed, which they call America's 30-06, which, all right, well, so I actually have 30-06 on the table for comparison. Clearly, the 30-06 case is quite a bit longer. You're looking at 54 millimeters for the Mosin and for 63 millimeters for the 30-06. But they say it generates comparable power, ballistics, what have you. This happens to be 182 grain, heavier than what you're going to see in 30-06 generally. But they do make lighter weight bullets. And so you really buy something like a Mosin. And in this case, if you're looking at an M39, you've picked the top of the line final evolution of a Mosin, in my opinion, and you're going to pay appropriate prices for that. So I'm not going to get into what I paid for this one. I think I paid too much, but I got in exchange for that a really nice example, unmolested. Now all these rifles are pretty much parts guns because by the nature of the fact that they didn't make the receivers. So this is a Russian hexagonal receiver with a 1942 dated barrel, and the receiver was then force matched to the barrel, so I can date the receiver and the barrel are period correct, and they went together. But a lot of things, like this sight has a different serial number. The bolt is matching, but the Russians went ahead and restocked, rebarreled, and changed the sights on these, and they upgraded them. So you are getting a parts gun or a refurb gun, no matter what M39 you buy, right? None of them are all finished produced straight from the factory. They've either been upgraded, whether that be using Russian receivers, which of course they didn't make any of their own receivers, so they're using someone else's. And then they use parts from different systems and they tweak and mix and match. And that's why this video could be an hour long, but it's not going to be, I promise. We're just going to focus on why the M39 is a good choice. And the good choice is because, again, going back to the caliber. Now, 7.62x54 was kind of like and it still is, one of the least expensive 30 caliber full powered rounds you can buy. It's not going to go anywhere anytime soon, and that's because the Russians still use it in their inventory. They use it in the PKM machine guns and the Dragunovs. And of course, it's been exported worldwide, well, for decades. This is a 19th century cartridge going back to like 1891. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that one. So it's 125 years old, 130 years old, and it's not going to go anywhere. So you can count on people loading it here in the US and then hopefully still importing it, whether or not be from Russia in the future, which is not looking good, but other countries still have that ammo available, whether that be to surplus out or to manufacture in new quantities. And demand is there because of just the number of rifles chambered in that caliber in the U.S., far and away of which, the most of which are going to be Mosins, like this one. So you get 30-06 ballistics for a fraction of the cost. Even today, it's still inexpensive relative to 30-06, which I think good 30-06 is hovering around $1 a round at this point. So you really have to decide whether you want to shoot that on a Sunday or not, because you can run 2 boxes of 30-06 and there goes $40, right? So your mileage may vary on that one. But I like 7.62x54 rimmed, especially when it comes in the spam can variety, if you can buy those still. If you see those around there, those are good for long-term storage. It's still a viable cartridge in terms of its purchase price and its ballistics. And of course, the Mosin pattern rifle, especially the M39, it's just such a smooth shooting rifle. This is one of the few Mosins I enjoy shooting. I think it goes in this order. M39 is the most enjoyable, followed by the M9130s and the M38s, and then finally, like the last one would be probably the M44s and the M53s, the really shorty Mosins. Those are not particularly fun. Those are the ones with the bayonets on them, the spike bayonets. But this is actually a fun rifle to shoot and surprisingly accurate. I think it's more accurate than the sights will allow it to be. I think its big drawback is the typical mediocre sights. These aren't as bad as some, but they could be a lot better. So if you could scope something like this, that would be, I think it's definitely scope worthy. It has the accuracy potential. I just haven't gotten around to doing that. And my receiver's not set up for that. But that's pretty much all I have for you on this one. We're not going to go into the deep dive in terms of all the history and who's used these and where the Finns got their receivers. That's a long, probably multi-part video, certainly a 1 hour long video, which we don't want to really do today. I just wanted to talk about the merits of a Mosin in general in 2023. And in this case, if you're going to go Mosin, you might as well go all the way. Now, prices on these are higher than your typical 9130, but you definitely get what you pay for. You're getting that high-quality, heavy barrel. You're getting a much better stock than a 9130. Yes, it comes with weight. It's a little bit heavier than a 9130 at almost 10 pounds. So it's M1 Garand weight for a bolt-action 5-shot rifle. But nevertheless, still fun to shoot. They're definitely collectible in my opinion. They're not imported anymore, so the prices are not going to go down on these. So buy once, cry once, and try to find the cleanest example you can get. And this is one of the ones that I did. Now, just before we go, on a side note, some of these rifles were actually made in the 60s and 70s. This is not one of those rifles, but a lot of them were reassembled or built in the 60s and 70s because the Finns wanted a training rifle. So they went back and they took parts, just like they did previously, and they built them all new. They're usually called like sneak patterns. So there'll be 1960s and 70s dated rifles. So much newer than something like this, but it's going to be the same quality level as something like this rifle, typical Tikka or Sako barrels. They didn't skimp in the 60s and 70s. They used the same parts and they just put them together, decades later. So that might be one of the rifles I'm going to try to pick up. If I get another M39, which I don't know if I'm going to need 3 of these, but if I pick up another one, it'd probably be a sneak pattern. They go for a little bit more money, but they are pretty much unissued, superb condition in a lot of cases. So that's all I pretty much have for this episode. I might bring out the other M39s and other Mosins I have and start doing a head-to-head comparison. But this is all we're going to talk about today. So this has been episode 30 of Rabbit Hole Reviews, talking about the Finnish M39 pattern Mosin rifle.